My name's Buzz Schultz, and I'm from the Northern Virginia area, just outside Washington, D.C., as we say, inside the Beltway. The enslavers in my family history are two. They both came from the same geographic location. That would be about 100 miles from where I live in Louisa County, Louisa, Virginia, very near Richmond, Virginia. It's still a very rural county. And their names were Stapleton Dabney Gooch and Dr. Matthew Anderson. I became aware of this 2 years and a month ago. I almost can give you the date. It was definitely in May 2 years ago, when a cousin sent me a document, which I carry with me wherever I go. You can tell I've been carrying it for 2 years because it's now in two pieces, but I show it to folks because it's an 1848 document that recites some personal property, chattels, etc., that Dr. Anderson is receiving from his mother, who's the administratrix of his daddy's estate. Daddy died at a young age. There's 10 children. You got to divide it up, and there's got to be paperwork to prove that you did it right. So he's signing this document and taking receipt of a horse and a cart and things like that, but he's also taking possession of 1,700 and $50 worth of Negroes. To wit, a word used commonly in those days. To wit, meaning that is, Edmund, John, Sally, Sallie, Jemima, and child Eliza. Particularly the last part, as you may have been able to tell. Child Eliza rocked my world. I knew nothing of this. I knew my grandmother was from Southern Virginia, but it just never occurred to me. The never occurred to me can be summed up in went to an all-white high school in the 60s, just a mile or two from where in the 50s Brown versus Board had been decided. Jeb Stuart High School, so named for obvious purposes. 425 graduates, all white, but one. University of Virginia, public institution of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I attended there for 4 years, all white, all male. I'm ROTC, I go into the U.S. Army. I serve stateside as an officer, of course, as an ROTC person. And I go to Vietnam. I went back and looked at the training class for the officers. I have a photo of the 45 of us. One African American. I hesitate to use the word token. And my experience in Vietnam was not hostile combat Hollywood type stuff that you're familiar with. I was in the Transportation Corps. I was in a port. Certainly those who wore officers' credentials were vastly white. I returned to Virginia to go to law school at the College of William and Mary's Law School, called the Marshall Wythe School of Law. Class of 170. 8 women, the rest all males, all white. So as you can see, it's not something that I thought about very often. My suburban community where I grew up and went to high school was essentially all white. Fairfax County practice was all the African Americans across a vast geographical expanse of Fairfax County bused to a single high school, not that far from my house. I never knew about it, or certainly don't recall ever knowing about it 50-some years later. It is important to make amends, although I might not use that word myself, for what has happened. I like to characterize my emotions about this into 3 pieces. And often the question is, don't you feel guilty? I feel no guilt because I didn't even know I had an Anderson in my family tree, much less that there were enslavers and a Gooch as well. But I'm angry because of what I was taught in these Virginia institutions and elementary school as well. I went back and found one of the textbooks. Virginia is very proud of teaching Virginia history. Textbook shows the 1619 event, the arrival of the first slaves this country. They have luggage, and they're dressed nattily and well. And the book just goes on. Slavery's not mentioned. They show people working in the fields alongside the whites and refer to them as field workers. Eventually, in explaining this thing called the war between the states, they did refer to the fact that one of the causes, not the first they would list, was slavery. The last thing that I would want to say is that the making of amends, to me, I didn't characterize my other reactions. There's anger at that. There is guilt. It's just guilt about the white privilege that I've enjoyed. I was able to buy a home on the GI Bill. That's just one example. And those who came home from World War II who were of color were not entitled to use the GI Bill, as my daddy was. Both my parents were Marine Corps veterans in World War II, officers. And the last piece is that I feel shame for what this country sells as democracy. If that's enough, thank you.